Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan, and welcome to the latest part of our entertainment show. As you know, in the past, we've been running a famous, renowned worldwide documentary on the Stargate franchise. We've spoken to renowned actors from Stargate Atlantis, Stargate SG1, Stargate Movie, Stargate Origins, and the Stargate universe as well. And we speak to many actors across all sorts of genres, actresses, in terms of their guest appearances in Stargate. And we're delighted now to be joined by one of the original bad boys of Stargate SG1. He played the ultimate god, dare I say. In fact, he believed he was the god of the universe in terms of domination. Resembled after the Egyptian pharaohs, he played the character Apophis. He appeared in over 20 episodes from 1997 to 2005. He appeared in the original pilot episode and the first two episodes of the iconic TV series, the one and only Peter Williams. And Peter, is Apophis still coming to you when you close your eyes at bed at 12 o'clock in the night and you fall asleep? Is that Underlord, dare I say, saying to you, I want to get out, I'm coming for you someday soon?
Jim Conlan, you are a perceptive man. You can spot a God complex when you see one. It's the kind of thing that stays with you if you let it. And I have definitely let it. I appreciate being Apophis still at this late stage. I don't mind that I'm one of the last actors you got to, but to answer your question more directly, yes, every night I go to bed, I get these visions of grandeur in my head. Yes, I am God. Bow before me.
You are God. You've taken many lives in your time. That's for certain. No mercy was your motto, Peter Williams. Peter, in terms of the character Apophis and the project, let's go right back to the start. Obviously, Stargate SG1, they signed up Richard Dean Anderson, they'd signed up Christopher Judge, two iconic sort of stars. Michael Shanks was an up-and-coming star, Amanda Tapping was starting out. In terms of, they looked at the original movie, they said, who could we get back from the original movie? They got Alexis Cruz back from the original movie, and they got Share's father, Asrov, from the original movie. They were the two original characters. So obviously they were looking for a bad guy. Raw was done. They came up with this character Apophis. And tell us the story how Peter Williams became Apophis and sort of landed that sort of role. How did that whole story come about? Is it a good story, or is it a normal talented agent?
It's a great story. Listen, I wasn't a MacGyver-sized star or an old football player like Christopher Judge, or I had not been in the original movie, but I was very familiar to Canadian audiences because I had been on two different TV series over here. And on one of them, I had the good fortune to play a Jamaican character, and the show ran for 5 years. And on that show, I grew dreadlocks. Why am I telling you this? If you envision Jay Davidson, who played Ra in the movie, he had long hair. My dreadlocks were down to my shoulders, so I had long hair. I have a similar kind of brown-skinned, good-looking androgyny about my features, and I think they saw the resemblance and a way to carry on that sort of visage into the TV series. Not only that, I had done an episode of MacGyver with Richard Dean before, Richard Dean and the producer, Michael Greenberg. And they remembered me when I came into audition for Apophis. It didn't stop them from dragging out the audition process for weeks and weeks and weeks, though, driving me completely bananas. But it came my way in the end. And then they told me to shave off my dreadlocks. So that's the short story. Oh, yeah. There's another little twist to that. Brad Wright had worked as a story editor, got his beginnings in story on one of the series that I had worked on in Canada, a show called Neon Rider. So I knew Brad before Stargate.
It's interesting you bring up that, Peter. I spoke to Liam McIntyre, who got cast in the iconic role of Spartacus. He plays Spartacus, and it took him roughly back and forth when the previous actor, Lord Mercy, died with cancer. 18 months it took in terms of that casting for Spartacus. So in terms of, I was just wondering, in terms of the Apophis, was there many other contenders that you were up against for that sort of role in terms of that? Or they had some ideas set on you in terms of what they were looking after? Were they looking for, you mentioned that Raw type character who played the previous Raw. Had they narrowed it down in terms of what they were looking at for in terms of to play Apophis?
You're not always privy to what they're thinking, but I will tell you, you've hit upon another little story. When I first went in to read for Stargate, I actually read for the role of Tilk.
Okay.
I read for Tilk first, and I got called back thinking that I was going to be called back for Tilk. I wasn't. I was called back for this guy named Apophis, who, having not been in the movie, no one knew very much about. You know, when you audition, you're only given a small portion of the script called sides. You're not given the whole thing. So I really had no idea that I was reading for the ultimate baddie. But during one of my callbacks, Michael Greenberg, who was in on the callback, suddenly did a very cliche, why didn't I think of this? I knew at that moment that a penny had dropped and that I was getting closer to something. They kept me waiting for maybe 5 weeks over a Christmas and a New Year period before I was told I got the part. And once I saw Children of the Gods, I realized how significant a victory that was. A feather in my cap, and the rest is history.
And the opening pilot, it's breathtaking. In the first 2 episodes of Stargate, it's almost like an entourage to a movie. It's a movie, and if you took those 2 episodes and stood them alone, you could have a featured sort of movie in that. But there was in terms of Stargate, you brought up more, dare I say, that first 2 episodes, more adult theme, the thing about you picking Shari as your queen and that sort of process there of the unrobing, that sort of adult sort of thing. Were you looking on that and you're saying to yourself as an actor, we're really paying homage here to maybe ancient Egypt and to what it was really like in terms of these sort of pharaohs, in terms of how they ruled us? We're not maybe making it campy, we're making it feel very much like the real thing.
Yes, absolutely, man. It wasn't lost on me. Yeah, they hired a serious director to direct that first one, Mario Azzopardi. He's Maltese, and he's a very serious man with a long career behind him. What was I going to say? Yeah, the adult nature of the show, I think, was as a result of the investment behind it. Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer had identified Showtime as the place where it was going to air, and Showtime had pre-purchased 4 seasons. So we became one of those rare shows that didn't have to scrounge for money. The first 4 years were paid for, and they spared no expense. The fact that they shot it like an adult show was probably because Showtime allowed things like full frontal nudity on their channel at a time when, well, hey, most American television still doesn't. You know, but this was something quite fresh and risque at the time. So much so, there was significant backlash to it after it aired, and they felt the need to re-edit and exclude all of the nudity. But you know, you've got collectors out there who have the original still.
And Peter, in terms of the voice enhancement, in terms of playing the Gaold, I spoke to numerous actors who were sort of said, obviously you try to imagine what it almost feels like, and you don't actually see it until the editing is sort of overdone in the background. But when you were first experienced that and they told right, where you don't have to try to put on an accent, you don't have to try and put on a different sort of variation. We're going to do these modifiers to enhance your sort of voice. Were you sort of curious yourself, oh, how's this going to work now? Is it going to feel almost like robotic, like a RoboCop sort of thing? Or were you just sort of wondering to yourself, how deep can this actually make it? And were you sort of shocked in terms of how the words you pitched were actually came out and in a different, say, alternative version?
I was surprised and slightly concerned, but we were directed specifically because these voices were going to be altered. The term they used at the time was a term called was flanging. They sent the audio track to the studio and had it flanged. That's how they referred to it. But we were coached as actors to deliver our lines in a sort of monotonous tone so that they could alter it to their liking. So it was a little different, but it's sort of we understood. I was surprised when I actually heard it, but pleasantly surprised that you could actually make out the words. You know, I didn't want it to sound like gibberish, and fortunately it wasn't. They actually had a ancient Egyptian language expert on set for the first few episodes as well, especially for the dialogue between Daniel and the Goa'uld.
And I suppose, Peter, I have to ask you about wardrobe and the costumes and the design in terms of the Apophis, the golden sort of nature in terms of that. In terms of when you first saw the wardrobe and the outfits, and obviously you probably saw sketches and animations and character designs of what he sort of looked like. We sort of blown away in terms of the detail that they went into to make him almost feel sort of godlike. It was almost like golden sort of robes in terms of that. And was makeup and wardrobe for you? I know that for most actors they're early mornings, but was it almost enjoyable for you because you actually got your face to be seen while others obviously didn't?
Yes. That it was very enjoyable. Let me tell you a couple of little things about that. Some actors really don't like wearing prosthetics. To me, I didn't mind. It really felt like I was, you know, in a playground at that point. It felt very real to me. My character, I had to go through several wardrobe fittings per episode, which only made my bottom line far more pleasant. You know, you get paid for these wardrobe calls. You get paid for being in makeup for 5 hours. So that was one of the good things about it. The wardrobe designer, Christina McQuarrie, her name was award-winning. She won some awards for it, and she put together a little book. There's a book out there with all her designs, and she's quoted in the book as saying the Apophis outfits were among her favorites to make. So I was treated royally during my my wardrobe calls. The makeup trailer is one of the funnest places you can be on a set. It's always fun in there. Everybody comes through there. The attention to detail is such that you feel extremely special. I loved the makeup and wardrobe process. You can also imagine all the puns, Goa'uld and gold. And to this day, I try to only sign my autograph with a gold pen, for example. Okay. And then I saw that carriage that King Charles, you know, got coronated in, and I thought of the fun I could have with that on Twitter. I hope somebody photoshops Apophis into that carriage.
And Peter, in terms of, obviously we know with sort of sci-fi shows, and obviously the shot in famous Vancouver, and we're going back, say, to 1997. I'm just wondering, in those early episodes, especially in season 1, those opening debuts episodes you mentioned about Shock being an award-winning director and producer, had you elements of green screen back in those sort of days in terms of the shooting, or as you went on in terms of the seasons, did green screen become more relevant in terms of the outer world stuff? Because I know they built so many sets in terms of Stargate from scratch, build them up from nothing. But I'm just wondering, in those opening sort of episodes and scenes where we see snakes coming out of people's bellies and that, were you almost like imagining those roles, imagining those sequences and what they would look like in green screen, or had you some sort of bit of props to alienate you, maybe looking up in terms of cameras above you to give you a sort of sense of what it would look like?
A lot of ugly little props around set so that you could imagine it. But of course, I'm thinking of that what do you call it? Symbiote coming out of the tummy. They had a little mock-up of a rubber mock-up. They spared no expense. I can't recall green screen in the first 2 episodes, but it must have been there because when you think of the kawoosh in the gate, there's no way to recreate that or to when you're shooting. They had to describe it to you so that you could fake it. I will say that when you mentioned a little bit earlier about my character being one of the ones whose face was always visible, I had 2 helmets. One of them was permanently closed, and one of them had a hydraulically operated face opening. So for those first few episodes, there was a man whose job it was right behind my ass the whole time, listening to my lines, so that when I finished my lines, he could hydraulically close that or open that face shield. And so that's how rudimentary it was in the early days, and green screen and all of that special effects came a little later.
Yeah, whatever you have to do to make a living, I suppose, Peter, in terms of that.
He's probably got a few stories.
Yeah. Peter, in terms of the sets now and the Stargate itself and the set, were you sort of the detail, the choreography, how big it was? People, I spoke to many actors and they can't get over how actually big the actual Stargate it was itself. And people are saying that it was nearly up as far as 8 feet tall. It was almost like you were in a aircraft hangar. When you came in and you saw this, and blew you out of mind. And sometimes the TV screens can project something as being bigger than what it was, but most people I've spoken to said that this was a really, really big piece of construction.
Really big. And yes, I was surprised. I had never worked on anything quite so elaborate, and only once have I worked on something as elaborate since. It's memorable for that alone. You got to remember, the Bridge Studios, where most of the interiors were shot, was built specifically for Stargate. I mean, most of the sound stage, it existed before Stargate, but it was a tiny studio. Stargate money built that thing into a multi-stage behemoth, I guess the word is. The Bridge Studios. It was ours for years.
Yeah. And Peter, in terms of your character now, Apophis, you mentioned there having that luxury in terms of actors setting off, and in terms of that, maybe that 4-season sort of comfort sort of buffer zone. But had you, in terms of how obviously bad guys in TV series, they can be wrote off at any sort of time in terms of producers, directors. It's almost not like Richard Dean Anderson, you're the star of the show, or Christopher Judge, you're going to be there from start to finish. Were you constantly watching script per script, or did you have a sort of story arc per season? And were you think to yourself, right, is it going to be renewed after this? Are they going to renew my character after this season? Or am I going to be the cliche of that end of the season 1 sort of finale? And was it almost sort of dread that you could be killed off at any stage?
To be sure, I'll be honest, there were many periods of insecurity that came along with this part, but it became obvious early on that my character was going to be used sporadically, but in a deliberate way. They tended to roll out Apophis for things like season openers, season enders, double episodes, ratings weeks, things like that. So I knew that when a significant period in the industry was coming around, I was probably going to get a script. The question was, how big was my involvement? Because a character that large can be overused. So I guess that was the reasoning behind using me maybe 3-4 times a season and no more. And every time they killed me off, it could have been the last time. Eventually it was, but the joke, it became a joke, you know, Apophis is dead again, how are they going to reveal he didn't actually die? Yeah, so it became a joke until it wasn't. And even then, flashbacks, and in season 8, when Christopher Judge wrote an episode, he wrote Apophis in. And there were other bad guys and other very good bad guys. I've met them all now after the series is over. I never knew any of them before, but I've met them all at these conventions that are so much fun and that we all go to, and we all get to know each other at. God rest Cliff Simon. Because
I spoke to Cliff. I spoke to Cliff 2 months before he passed. It was a great character. Peter, in terms of, I remember speaking to, just brought a memory back to me about speaking to Tony Amadolo, who played Master Braytak, and Tony was telling me he had a sort of sporadic role throughout the sort of seasons as well, and he would say to me, whenever they had an idea of using the sort of Braytak, they would give a bit of notice and they would contact him maybe 2 weeks in advance, let him know that, right, come to Vancouver, we're going to need you for the best part of 3 weeks or 4 weeks, because Tony did an awful lot of his work out in New York, so in terms of his sort of production, so it'll be a hike for him to Vancouver. Was it the sort of same for you? Did he give you that sort of notice, and were there times when they came to you, Peter Williams, and you said, listen, maybe if you could come back maybe in 2 or 3 weeks, I'm currently involved in something, it's nearly wrapping up in terms of that, and were there times when they came to you and you were sort of tied down or hooked down on something and you said, could you maybe push it back for 2 or 3 weeks, or when Stargate came calling and had you to basically go?
Another cool question. I lived in Vancouver. I actually lived maybe 20 minutes away from the studio, so I was pretty much always available. But there was a time during Stargate where I got a show I got another series. I was working on another show, a sort of coroner drama, for the CBC, a thing called Da Vinci's Inquest. And there was one time where I was double booked, but it worked out great because it was for that double episode where Apophis reappeared with the face, the face plates.
Okay, the Hell episode, was it?
The Hell episode, yes. That was a double episode.
Yeah.
And in the first part, there was a big reveal at the end. And in the first part, most of it was done with another actor playing Neonak, who was my character.
Yes.
And they used another actor for that. I wasn't available. Dion Johnson played Neonak. And when time came for the second half, I was free. They were able to reveal my face as Apophis. So,
and Peter, in terms of working, obviously you were there at the beginning. You worked with Richard Dean Anderson. You worked with Michael Shanks, and Michael Shanks came and go throughout the sort of seasons, but came back towards the end. And obviously there was a changing of the guard halfway through Stargate. I know that this happened after your sort of time, but did you had any sort of longing to come back and work with the new sort of principal actors in terms of who played sort of prominent roles, or were you happy just to have been with the sort of the original cast with Richard and with Christopher and Amanda and Michael and Lord rest him his soul. Oh, his name is who played the chief, the bald, but Hammonds.
Oh
Hammonds.
yes, Don Davis.
Don Davis, Lord rest his soul. Yeah. In
Great
terms
guy.
of playing with those characters, were you sort of happy with that in terms of your involvement running while they were involved?
I was actually, because I sort of lost touch with Stargate for a couple of years after they finally killed Apophis. But when I kept showing up in flashbacks and being referred to, and those flashbacks, you get paid just like you were on set. So it was nice. You didn't have to go to work, but you got a check. That was kind of cool. I started, hearing that I was showing up, or they were talking about my character. So I never actually lost hope. And round about season 7, season 8, I began to feel like I could actually come back, even though Baal was already the big baddie at that point. And I guess it was confirmed when they did the standalone movies after the franchise ended that I got a little cameo in one. So yeah, it was. I always felt like I could show up.
And was there ever opportunities for you? I know Stargate Atlantis was a sort of a spin-off sort of show of Stargate. I spoke to a good lot of actors and actresses who appeared in that. And obviously people who had guest roles in Stargate were brought into Stargate Atlantis to obviously to beef up that, to have that sort of connection with Stargate SG1. And some actors and actresses actually played different sort of characters or were masked in Stargate Atlantis in terms of to reveal, obviously, that they weren't the sort of actors from SG1. Had any interest or anyone from Stargate Atlantis come to you and say, Peter, we've got this idea of you to be a race in Stargate Atlantis, or be a different type of character, or be someone that obviously your voice was enhanced, so you could have the opportunity of maybe changing your looks to look like a normal sort of character? Did any talk of that ever come about?
I wasn't privy to any, if there was any talk, but I would think, due to the grandeur of Apophis, that might have been difficult in my case. And I tend to have a sort of singular kind of look as well. So I think it would have been tough. I'm not sure that ever happened. Yeah.
And Peter, obviously Stargate is in the news now at the moment in terms of a relaunch, a rebuff of that. Do you think it's about time, really, that obviously maybe 10 years has gone since Stargate Origins, the last sort of sequence, and obviously Stargate SG1 and Stargate Atlantis were the two most successful. When they went out there and did Stargate Universe and tried to do, dare I say, a Battlestar Galactica version of Stargate, it didn't really go down too well, sort of delved away from what they know of. Do you feel maybe they're going to go back to the sort of norm? And how excited are you? Are you going to actually look on and maybe see what sort of concept they're going to come out with this time?
Here's what I think. I was a fan of Stargate before I got involved with it. I loved the movie. I enjoyed it very much. I thought the last 15 minutes were a little weak, but it's one of those movies that stuck with me. I really liked it. I love the concept. I'm a kid that grew up with National Geographic and pictures of Egyptian mummies and pyramids.
Dr. Sahi Owas and these type of guys.
All of that stuff. And I just loved it. I'm naturally interested in that kind of thing. And the whole concept of Stargate is fascinating. I mean, it's the stuff of fantasy, extreme fantasy. And I love it. And I think Stargate is the perfect vehicle for a reboot. Now, would I like to be involved? Yes, I'll put that out there. I would love to be involved. I would love for there to be some kind of continuity with Apophis, just as I think that Apophis was a little bit of continuity with Ra. In terms of the mythology and in terms of the appearance as well. So I would love for them to contact me, even if it was a cameo or a fleeting passing reference or an in-joke, something. I would just love it to be connected. Failing that, however, I will always be connected to Stargate somehow because of my involvement in the television program.
And Peter, I know it's great that we have you on there to talk to you about Stargate there today. Obviously, with some actors, they're resignated to the certain roles, and obviously with Richard Dean Anderson, he was related to MacGyver and sort of Stargate, and he likes his privacy at this time of life and this term of thing. He doesn't really do much media, doesn't really do much concept. But the friendships and the bonds that you formed with those sort of actors, do they still are in place? I remember speaking to some of the cast of Battlestar Galacticus, and Eddie Olmos, the great Eddie Olmos. I spoke to Eddie, and Eddie was telling me they're still almost like a family. They text each other when everyone's birthdays come around. They know when each other's birthdays, wedding anniversaries. They have these sort of Zoom sort of dinner calls sort of once a year in terms of the harmony, because they spent 7-8 years together. But you're almost the same in Stargate SG1. You almost spent that 5-6 years ago. Do you still have Amanda tapping, sending you a text message or ring you up and say, listen, I'm on this sort of show, I've got an idea for this, Peter, what do you think in terms of that? Obviously she's doing an awful lot of producing sort of work. Does Michael Shanks send you the odd message saying Nottingham Forest are going to stay in the Premier League, or what is there still a good vibe between you, or are you in touch, still close touch with any of the original set?
The only one I would say that I was in touch with from the original set would be Christopher Judge. But we don't text each other with any regularity. I mean, I'll fire a joke at him on Twitter every now and again if I see something like when he got this Kratos character, I teased him a little bit about it. But I will tell you though, I've gotten very, very close, like really close with the 4 baddies. I mean, we call ourselves 4, actually 5 if you include Dean Aylesworth, who played Anubis. So it would be Nerty, Jacqueline Samuda. It would be Hathor, who is Sue-Ann Braun, Cliff Simon, and myself, and Doug Arthurs, who played Herur. You know, the bad guys have sort of become close. Wow. But we only see each other at these conventions. Now the conventions are several times a year, or they used to be. Nowadays it's 1 a year or 2 a year, you know, and they're getting smaller and smaller, and not all of them have us all at the same time. So that's one of the beauties about this Stargate thing. It never dies. I'm traveling perhaps in 2 months. I'm going to Atlanta to another convention. You know, they never seem to end. And it's great.
And Peter,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No. I'm sorry for cutting across you. You mentioned there before we came on air that you've probably 2 sort of projects in the pipeline that you might want to spend a tiny bit of time talking about. Obviously, not to give too much away, and you obviously speak what you can speak about. In terms of that, is this a productive time for Peter Williams in 2023? We're very much out of the COVID now. The industry is back to where it was. Are you a busy man these days, Peter?
I have to say, yes, it has been very quiet the last few years because of the COVID pandemic and you know, passage of time. Careers tend to go through phases. Mine went through a little bit of a lull. However, I'm happy to say I got myself a new agent now. I'm auditioning like crazy, and I have a couple of projects that I can talk about, which is a real pleasure for me to do so, because half the time you ask me about what are you doing lately, it drives me to a deep depression, but not lately. I did a I had the opportunity to play a rich man for the first time in my life, which is an odd thing. You know, you get a lot of cops, you get a lot of taxi drivers, you get a lot of homeless guys, you get a lot of, you know, street kids, drug dealers, that kind of thing. You know, cliche parts, cops, the odd lawyer, teachers. But this time I got to play a man that owns resorts around the world in a Lifetime movie, a sort of light romance television movie. It's called All Aboard for Love, and it just got released. So I can tell you, you know, it's out there. It's out there now. So All Aboard for Love. I'm not the star of it, but I play the father of the star. Tempus fugit. Yeah. So yeah, All Aboard for Love. So the other
Peter,
one, I want to tell you about
continue.
one other one.
Yeah.
I'm doing a web series called Garvey's Ghost. Marcus Garvey, for those of you that don't know, was a Jamaican Africanist, Black liberationist, turn of the 20th century. He was Jamaican, and he was responsible for inspiring all of the other Black activists that came later, Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and many, many, many others. Marcus Garvey, if you listen to any reggae music, you know the name Marcus Garvey. And we're playing, we're doing a web series on early Marcus Garvey, and we're doing it as a sort of comedy, a sort of Afro-punk comedy, in order to broaden the appeal. There you go. I'll just be quick.
No problem, Peter. Peter, I know as an actor in the business, you've been in the business an awful long time, and I know myself now. I'm writing a pet project at the moment. I'm writing a novel. It's Morphe Combat sort of take on Gotham City in terms of, it's called Deacon City. It's going well at the moment. A few producers and are interested in terms of that. Do you ever delve into the writing world in terms of that? Has that ever been an interest of yourselves?
It has, actually, but it hasn't manifested itself in writing for the screen. I have a dormant blog. You can find the link on my Twitter page. And my Twitter handle is Actual Apophis. You may have noticed. Actual Apophis on Twitter. My blog is dormant now, but I poured my heart out for a few years on there. So there's lots of stuff there that I'm very proud of. I'm a wordy sort of fella, and it tends to be evident in this blog. No, I haven't written any screenplays. I don't rule it out, though.
Yeah. And Peter, I know you spent a good lot of years in England, and you're an avid Nottingham Forest fan, and you've been to this part of the world once. You haven't seen the Emerald Isle with your own green eyes yet. Is it on the sort of bucket list to visit the castles, the Viking castles and the Norman castles? And who knows, you might find a version of a Viking Viking there that maybe had a symbiote in him, and you can start to see if you discover one of your brothers, dare I say.
Oh, I have listen, when you say bucket list, it's top of my bucket list. I've been to Wales, I've been to Scotland, and I sometimes I even feel part British. I spent a lot of formative years, a lot of time in England, as you mentioned. And why I'm a Nottingham Forest fan is because I went to Nottingham Uni during the years when we won the European Cup twice. So I know about the legend of Brian Clough and Trevor Francis and Tony Woodcock and Peter Shilton and all of those good names. Viv Anderson, first Black player to play for England. Significant. But I never got to Ireland, and I cannot figure out why. Perhaps at that time, Ireland had a reputation. Ireland was Margaret Thatcher and the Irish Republican Army. And
down south, you would have been fine, Peter. Down south, you should come my way. Down south.
I have a feeling you're right.
If you stayed away from the north, the 6 counties north, anywhere down south, you would have been perfectly fine. You would have found yourself a nice cottage for the night, a hay barn, a few cattle, a few sheep, and you would have been away with yourself.
And a decent pub with a well-pulled pint of Guinness.
Yeah, or not, or a bit of brandy to warm the stomach, as the saying goes, a bit of Irish brandy.
Yeah, you know what? I just must. I mean, I'll probably look you up, Jim.
Peter, for the final sort of 30 seconds now, and I'm going to test you with this sort of question now. Let's
Sure.
pretend, and I asked this to everyone, but I haven't asked this sort of in a while, but it's sort of reminiscent, prominent to you. Let's pretend there was a Stargate encyclopedia, a sort of dictionary as such. And the new sort of people that were producing that Stargate encyclopedia, the dictionary, they went down through all the fictional characters. And obviously at the start, they go to Apophis. And they started in the synopsis of Apophis, they have 2 blank sentences underneath his name. And they get onto your talent agent who gets onto yourself and listen, we want Peter Williams to write those 2 sentences in his own words to describe Apophis. What would Peter Williams like those 2 sentences to read? In a dictionary, Apophis, 2 blank sentences. What should they say?
Apophis. Well, I will draw on the wellspring of knowledge that I gained once I got the part. I know that Apophis is the serpent god, ruler of the night, vanquished in the day, always to return. So I think if I was to interpret that for a synopsis in 2 sentences, that really is something to put a guy on the spot. So I will say,
I know. I said I leave the best one to last. I said if I introduced this question in the first interview, he'd sort of zoom out. He'd leave me hanging. So I said I leave it right till the end.
A is for Apophis. A is for anaconda. Apophis is best remembered as an anaconda, a snake king. Here it is. Apophis, you never forget your first gold. Oh man, you really, you never forget your first. Yeah, that's it. You never forget your first.
You never forget your first. Simple and sort of precise. Peter Williams.
And a little bit naughty at the same time.
No. Yeah, I suppose so. True. When you think how he took his mates in terms of that, there was no, dare I say, there was no give and take. It was your mind, that's it. Deal with it. That was Apophis' sort of team in terms of that. Peter Williams, an absolute pleasure.
It goes without saying that I want the mating ritual to remain in everybody's mind.
Yeah. True. But I don't know if the snakes got to experience the same sense of emotions than the human beings actually got to sense in terms of that. But Peter Williams, for me, Jim Conlan, an absolute pleasure talking to you on there. It's great to see you, and great Nick, great LT, a great vibe, a great humor, a great buzz for the industry, and still active, still wanting to get involved. And still, I would say to any producers, directors out there who are seeing this project or this interview at the moment, and obviously with the reboot of Stargate, do bring back Apophis. He's not dead yet. He's just there, I say, laying in the shadows, waiting to make his big reveal once more. Peter's the perfect guy to do that. And no doubt, Peter, we'll see you on the TV screens in the near future and rebranding that role of Apophis. But for the moment, from me, Jim Conlan, to you, Peter Williams, stay safe, take care, and God bless, mate.
Thank you very much, and stay away from replicators.
True.
All right.